Welcome to EdLeader with your host, Dr. Rob Jackson. Join Dr. Jackson for conversations and reflections on improving educational leadership from the classroom to the boardroom and beyond. Educational leadership is an ever-evolving opportunity to make a real and lasting difference in the lives of students, parents, and the community. And now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Jackson.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the third season of the EdLeader podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jackson, and I want to thank you for spending time with me today. As the podcast returns from our summer sabbatical, I want to welcome those who discovered the podcast while we were away. All summer, you kept listening to past episodes so much that I received notification from Chartable, the podcast rating service, that EdLeader had peaked at number 37 on the top 100 podcast chart in Hong Kong. Wow, and thank you. I'm planning for a big third season with more great guests and even a couple of special series this year. A big year needs a big start with a big-time guest, and that's what we have for you. Let's get to it. Today's guest is one of the most respected and highly regarded educational leaders in the state of North Carolina. He currently serves as the Executive Director of the North Carolina School Superintendents Association. He retired in April 2012 after serving 12 years as the Superintendent of the Alexander County School System. He also served as an Associate Superintendent and previously served as Principal at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. He served for 32 years in school administration. He was inducted into the Appalachian State University Reich College of Education Rhododendron Society in 2021, received the Alexander County Schools Award of Honor and Caldwell County Schools Education Hall of Honor Award in 2017. In 2012, he received the state's highest civilian award when he was awarded the Order of the Longleaf Pine in 2012. Twice selected as the Regional Superintendent of the Year, he was selected as the North Carolina High School Athletic Association Superintendent of the Year in 2007. More importantly than all of the awards and accolades and vast experience, today's guest is who superintendents call when they need advice, encouragement, or just a listening ear. My friends, please help me welcome today's guest, Mr. Jack Hoke. Jack, my friend, what an incredible honor to spend some time with you today, to be able to share you with all of our listeners on the EdLeader podcast. Welcome, my friend.
Good morning, Rob. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to those EdLeader podcasts every Monday morning, except for the last month or so. You've had to have a break here getting prepared for the 21-22 school year, and I'm glad you're launching this back as we begin the new school year.
Jack, you're exactly right. You know, sometimes we need that sabbatical just to kind of refresh, relax, rejuvenate. And, you know, I certainly am hopeful that our ed leaders, not only here in the state of North Carolina, but across the country and around the world, have given themselves permission to do those things, to step back for a little bit, because the work we do is so very important. Well, Jack, let's get into it a little bit. As I shared in the introduction, you are someone who I look up to, could not hold in higher regard or higher esteem. You speak into my career almost on a daily basis with wise counsel. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate all you do for me. Many years ago, you decided that you'd like to be an educator. You made that choice. What was it that drew you to education that consequently led you to be where you are today?
Rob, that's a great question to start. When I was in high school, I attended High Brighton High School, had an incredible experience, played football, basketball, and baseball, and had a coach who was so encouraging. He ended up being the associate superintendent in Caldwell County Schools, and I was a first-generation college student. I knew that I wanted to coach and have an impact on students like someone had on me. So I attended Appalachian State and got my degree in business education, and then came back and started teaching and coaching for about 5 years before I went into administration. Again, from my former high school basketball's encouragement, went into administration. But the opportunity to have an impact on youth the way there was an impact on me.
That paying it forward, Jack, is a common refrain among educators. And I think it's why I just enjoy being around educators and encouraging educators so much, because so often we hear from you, from me, you know, my story as well, very similar to yours, where someone did something amazing for us. They spoke into our lives, they encouraged us, they challenged us, and consequently, we want to do the same thing for others. Educators are just absolutely outstanding individuals and wonderful people. I really want to kind of have a conversation with you. You know, one of the things we've talked about several times is that the role of superintendent is so critical to success for a school system. You served for 12 years as a superintendent in a role that few are able to maintain for 4 years, and some only are in the role for 1 or 2 years. What was it that you were doing to sustain in that role for 12 years? How were you able to remain a superintendent as long as you wanted to?
Rob, I was fortunate to be named superintendent of the Alexander County Schools on January 1, 2001. And what I did, I worked real hard on superintendent board relations, I think, and I tried to build trust with my board members one at a time and collectively as we were going along. And I will say this, I was given the opportunity to grow in the job. I did an elementary principal, middle school principal, high school principal, and 2.5 years as associate superintendent. And I got the job. I had 24 years in education. And until you get in that seat, you don't realize how much you don't know about being a superintendent. You know a lot about education, but the superintendent's role is much different. So I was fortunate that they allowed me to grow into that role. The key I found was hiring quality people in the classroom and administrators, and then providing high quality support for teachers, support staff, and the central office staff. I also felt like it was so incredibly important to have a good relationship with the community, being involved in community functions, being involved in community organizations, being transparent with the community and your stakeholders. I took a lot of pride in school visits and getting to know the teachers. And in a small system, we had about 5,600 students. And when I was associate superintendent, every teacher that got hired, the final interview was with the associate superintendent. And when I became superintendent, I had my good friend, Dr. Jeff Hill, associate superintendent, as he completed that, to always let me know. So when it was possible, I would like to at least meet the teachers prior to being recommended to the Board of Education. So I think those were the things. And again, our school system motto was children first. And I always tried to keep in mind the decision we are making or recommending need to be what's in the best interest of our students, to try to always do that. And again, the hiring quality teachers, because there's nothing more important to a child's education than a quality teacher in the classroom. And then supporting our principals, because we had 11 principals, and the principal is closest to the teachers and to the students a lot more than we are at central office. When I would have my directors meeting on Monday, I'd say when we would start talking about doing something, I said, let's stop here. Let's look around the room and how many students do you see sitting up here? And there was none. So again, our role was to support the schools, the principals, and the teachers so that we can provide a high quality education for all students.
Jack, I tell you what, there is so much there for all of us to unpack. I've got a feeling I'm going to be listening to that response many times, because I heard so many powerful truisms there and so much incredible advice and a roadmap for success for any leader, regardless of their role. I heard you talk about putting children first. I heard you talk about being transparent. I also heard you talk a lot about relationships with the Board of Education, relationships with the community, relationships with the principals, relationships with the teachers. I even heard you talk about the relationship you had with your associate superintendent. Talk to me about relationships for just a second, Jack. How did you build those? How did you maintain those? Because it seems to me, as we've had conversations, sometimes folks just miss out on that. They get, inflated with self-importance sometimes, and they forget the power of people, and they miss that relationship piece. How did you build and sustain those relationships, Jack?
Well, you have to be authentic, and I really was concerned about the relationship, getting to know them individually, getting to know their families, getting to know their children, where they went to school, what their hopes and dreams were for their children. And that should be what the hopes and dreams are for every child and every child that was in the school system. And you have to work at it. And the thing you have to do is you have to spend a lot more time listening than you do talking, because we got two ears and one mouth. And I found the more you listen, the better off you were. And not only listen, use what you're hearing to make a difference for that individual and for the system as a whole. But you've got to continually work at it. And the thing that I enjoyed most is relationships with students at band and chorus, athletic events, FFA, all those things. When you got a one high school like we did at Alexander Central, and our office was on the grounds of Alexander Central, we were on the same complex, spending a lot of time with students. And we had 2 middle schools and 7 elementary schools, getting to know students. And I still see students today that thank me for something I did or said. And I may not remember that, but it's been a real privilege to still be in the community where hopefully as a team we had a huge impact. And again, to me, the key is it's not about me as superintendent, it's about our team doing what's best for students, because you can't do this work alone. You have to be the head coach, but you got to let your other folks do the work, and you support them and get them the resources. And again, you have to be willing to negotiate. And when things don't go your way, and they're not when you're working with commissioners or legislators, you have to be willing to see their point. We have to work towards a goal that will be good for your district and your students.
Absolutely. Thank you. You're exactly right. Every single one of those relationships, you mentioned being authentic in those relationships, being who you are, but that work piece to it and that constant work piece to it, you can't take it for granted, that's for sure. Well, Jack, a part of your work now is serving as the executive director for the North Carolina School Superintendents Association, and you do such powerful work in helping superintendents, and as they have things come up, they give you a call and ask for your advice. I certainly take advantage of that a lot, and I appreciate you always answering your phone and getting right back to me. As you work with educational leaders, what are some of the biggest challenges, just in general, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing educational leaders encountering today, Jack?
Well, and again, Rob, my particular role is working with superintendents, so I'm kind of going to use that terminology. But to me, the nature of the superintendency has shifted from being a major challenge to an almost impossibility with the chaotic, non-rational, and unpredictable world of school leadership that we're living in now. I think COVID-19 has created a situation that puts superintendents and Board of Education members in difficult situations. Last year, the issue was reopening of schools, how and when, and having virtual academies. And obviously, we had constraints with the governor's executive orders. And after a few months, our community started getting antsy to get back in school. And whether you were Plan A or Plan B, those things became a real challenge. And at one time, at least when I was superintendent for 12 years and observing superintendents in this role, this is my 10th year. When the superintendent made a recommendation and a board took action on it after discussion, we were probably able to please 80 to 85% of your stakeholders regularly, and maybe even higher. What I've seen since COVID, I'm not sure we're pleasing 50% of our stakeholders on about any issue around school reopenings, mask, vaccine, those kind of things. So it's made a very challenging job almost impossible.
Jack, you're exactly right. And myself and my colleagues across the state and across the country, and I'm sure those who have similar roles in other countries, are living that every single day. And a part of the challenge is, just as you mentioned, there are so many changes day to day caused by the COVID-19 numbers, caused by the concerns of the community, caused by the needs to protect the safety and well-being of our students and staff. And so really we are in a constant state of change, whether it's wearing masks, not wearing masks, whether it's promoting a vaccine that didn't exist at one point, and all the changes that are constantly going forward. As leaders are approaching the need for change in their district, whether it's a momentary change like wear a mask or not wear a mask, or a very large change like looking at the reading curriculum in the district, what general advice do you give leaders as they approach the need for change in their school or their school district?
Well, at one time, Rob, my advice was sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. For example, when you become superintendent of a district, I think you need to take a year kind of getting to know the district before you initiate a lot of changes and see what the sacred cows are. What's been working well, you certainly want to continue. In some areas that the board and the community have a concern with, and your educators kind of look at that. But in this day and time, with the constant changes in the rules and regulations, the COVID-19 surge, that 3 weeks ago we were talking about going back to school on some type of normal schedule and athletics. Everybody was excited about that. And then that Friday night, I saw a number of high school games that were canceled due to outbreaks or exposures to COVID. So again, I think you have to spend a lot of time working with your Board of Education, your leadership team, and your stakeholders to identify what needs to be changed and why. And I think you're exactly right. Ultimately, we've got to make decisions that's based on the best interest of our students in terms of educational and what's in their best interest, safety. So again, listening and getting a lot of input and trying to come up with the best solution for your particular district.
Jack, I think you're exactly right. And I very much appreciate that in terms of really keeping our focus on the main thing. And like I know, sometimes all of the air in the room is taken up by things in the community, in this case, COVID-19. When faced with all of those outside challenges in the community or in the state or the country or just in general, how did you keep your teachers and staff focused on the main thing as a superintendent, or what advice do you have for leaders around that work of in the midst of all the chaos, being able to create a center where we're really focused on our children? What advice do you have around that?
Well, in my opinion, the superintendent's role is to be an advocate for the district, working with the board, the county commissioners, county manager, your local legislators, Department of Public Instruction, to provide resources so that teachers and staff can stay focused on students and academic achievement, and also their social and emotional well-being. And I think we have to make sure we're educating the whole child. And I felt like as superintendent, it was my role to handle all that stuff on the periphery and allow the leadership team and the teachers to focus on what's best for students. And I found it was also incredibly helpful to continually talk about student achievement and where we were in open meetings with the board and try to keep our focus on that. And that's always a challenge. But again, keeping the teachers away from all the politics where they can just teach and students can learn was what I tried to do.
Keeping that safe haven almost, where inside the schoolhouse, we're really focused on educating students and taking care of students and their success is just absolutely crucial. Here we are, brand new school year. You've approached many, many brand new school years, my friend, in a lot of roles as teacher and coach, school leader, assistant principal, associate superintendent, and now in this crucial work you're doing. What advice do you have for ed leaders as they begin a brand new school year here in 2021, 2022?
Rob, I tell you what, we're entering our 17th month of COVID, which has been unprecedented time. And this is my 45th year in education. I've not seen a playbook for the pandemic, and nor has anyone else that I'm aware of. I think as leaders, we have to continually be encouragers to our staff and our community. We have to be transparent. We have to know when to draw the line in the sand that we're going to take a stand on an issue. And we also have to know when to negotiate. And remember, we have to be patient and give grace, especially during this time. And I think it's real critical for the leader to stay positive and keep what's best for students always at the forefront.
I think you're right. And you use that word grace. We were using that word a whole lot as we approached the start of the pandemic, and we should. And it seems like as month after month trudges by in this pandemic, and you mentioned 17 months for us in a pandemic, we start to get a bit tired. And grace is not a word we're using as much as we were using. And I think we need to continue to use it, and maybe even more so now that we're 17 months in, because everyone needs grace. This is tough, tough work, particularly with all the changes that we're constantly facing. And so that need for grace is paramount and probably never more needed as we approach and are in the 17th month of this pandemic. Well, I want to pivot a little bit. The pandemic certainly has caused us to pivot a lot, but I want to pivot in our conversation because one of the things that I've been able to benefit from and watch is your work in creating two of the most highly successful professional development programs for leaders that I've ever heard of, that I've ever read about, that I've ever seen highlighted in a national publication. And those programs, first, the Next Generation Superintendents Development Program, and then secondly, the Aspiring Superintendents Program, were both your babies, both your brainchild. And I know that you had others who helped you with the planning and thought. But as you were working to birth those programs, create those programs, and now sustain those programs for a number of years, what are the key elements to creating outstanding professional development, Jack? I know principals and superintendents are thinking about professional development for this school year, but what are you, as you put together professional development, what are you thinking about? What are those key elements?
Well, Rob, I'll talk about the two programs, or really three programs that we have going right now. But we'll start with the Aspiring Superintendents Program. When I got this job, I saw there was a need. There was nothing. There was principal professional development, not much superintendent professional development, and zero for aspiring potential superintendents in the central office. And I put together and worked with Bill Daggett on the initial Next Generation program. But as I looked at the aspiring superintendents and developing that, we've ended up with a design where we do 12 hours of pure leadership development, because I think you have to understand yourself before you can lead others. And I think that's a real important part of it. And then we do 12 hours of technical skills where I bring in sitting superintendents. Obviously, a number of state superintendents of the year do presentations to these groups. And we've tried to design it and with all of our presenters where they don't talk more than 15 minutes, and then they allow for table talk and have activities. So really it's learning from each other more than the presenters. While the presenters are outstanding, I think the opportunity to network and learn from your peers and develop a statewide network is so critical. And then we also have about 5 hours where you have a thought leader in the Aspiring Superintendents Program. We have 3 superintendents who used to be fairly young into the business, where they'll have 10 aspiring superintendents where they spend about 6 hours over the course of the program to talk with them. Again, that they've not been that far removed from the role of the aspiring. So again, incredible networking opportunities, incredible presenters, but more importantly, that conversation where they get to talk together. And so what I would like to do, you've been with the Aspiring Superintendents Program all 5 years. How have you benefited as being a sitting superintendent listening to these aspiring folks?
Jack, thank you for that question. And thank you. When you approached me as this program was launching, I was so very honored because, as you said, I was still really new in the superintendency. And thank you for letting me hang out as I am now approaching my 8th year in the superintendency. And one of the things that has been of incredible benefit to me is just what you just talked about, the way that these amazing presenters are really instructed or requested by you, the facilitator, to set up their presentation. So there's 15 minutes of a presentation and then an opportunity for the elbow partners, the small group, to really work through what they just heard and then share it back with each other through the lens of their experience and their talent and their expertise. And so even though this will be my 6th year in the Aspiring Superintendents Program, I'm there for all the sessions as we go into this brand new cohort. I get something every single time because it's different every single time because the participants are different and they're reflecting on what the presenters have said. And so that's been very powerful. It's also been very powerful from the networking and relationship piece to have the opportunity to spend time with educational leaders. It doesn't matter what role they're in, educational leaders are educational leaders, and to spend time with them and to hear their challenges and how they're approaching their challenges is rewarding. And then the last thing I'll say is really me following your model, which is you spend a lot of time, probably the majority of your workday, really building up and encouraging and mentoring and helping, and probably more than anything, listening to leaders as they deal with what they're dealing with. And so having that same opportunity as a thought leader to allow those who are in the cohort I work with to share their experiences and then to think with them and encourage them and maybe give them a little advice based on the things that I've seen in my career has just been very powerful. Thank you for that question. It has been a powerful experience for me.
All right, now we'll move to the next generation superintendent development program, which we finished 8 years doing that. This past year, we had 52 superintendents attend. And again, it's the same model. It was the initial pure leadership development for 12 hours, technical skills and survival skills. Bill Daggett was in on the initial from the International Center. He and I and his team kind of designed it first year, and then I kind of tweaked it because we had too many days and kind of meet the needs of superintendent. And what I found to be the most beneficial in running any program or any conference that we have, before anybody presents, I have a small group of superintendents, usually 4 or 5, that will meet with the presenter, kind of see what they're wanting to talk about, and then tell them what our needs are. So it's tailored to the superintendents from North Carolina sitting in the room. I think that's been incredibly helpful. And Rob, I'll go back to the reason I really wanted the opportunity to serve as executive director. In 2005, I was superintendent at Alexander County Schools, and Dr. Brad Sneeden, who was vice president at UNC at the time, had been deputy state superintendent, kept calling me about becoming a member of a cohort of superintendents, about 25. And I kept telling him, no, Brad, I don't have time. I can't be gone. And then one day in the summer, they called and said, Dr. Brad Sneeden's here to see you. Didn't tell me he was coming. He called to make sure I was going to be in the office, unbeknownst to me. And he came in and we talked for about 2 hours, and he wouldn't leave till I agreed to go to the program. And let me tell you this, that was a game changer because I had the opportunity to sit in that program with some incredible leaders, Dr. Bill Harrison, Dr. Rodney Shotwell, Dr. Shirley Prince, Dr. Stuart Hobbs, and I became a small town superintendent. I was a little fish in a big pond when I was those folks, but I listened and learned, and boy, it changed my perspective. I started thinking more about systems leadership, more about developing capacity in your leaders, and more about being more hands-off and letting them do the work and provide the resources. So it was a game changer for me, and I wanted to be able to do that with our superintendents. Now, again, you're not getting off easy. So you were in your first year at Eden Shawan, you were in the program, and this past year was your 7th year. You're just 1 year behind Dr. Barry Williams. Tell me what the difference is in your first year and the 7th year, and what you get out of the program now.
Wow, thank you very much for asking that question. And I'm excited about my 8th year as superintendent, going into my 8th year as a participant in the Next Generation Superintendents Development Program, because it is a game changer for me every single year. As a brand new superintendent, when the program was launching, there was a early push to make sure brand new superintendents were a part of the program. It's open to everyone. And past guest, Dr. Ethan Linker, who's one of the longest serving superintendents in our state, is a member of that program every single year. So it's clearly for superintendents, regardless of how many years they've been superintendent, whether they're months on the job, days on the job, or years and years on the job. For me, though, hearing from those speakers, you mentioned Bill Daggett. We had him as a guest on the podcast as well, and I'll link that podcast episode in the show notes. But hearing from these powerful speakers, another speaker we heard from, Dr. Danielle Dickey, because I heard Dr. Dickey speak in the program from the School Superintendents Association and recognized the power of his message around literacy, it became very important to bring him back to our district. And so those connection points are really what stand out for me. The power of the program, like the Aspiring Superintendents program, though, is sitting at a table with other superintendents like Dr. Patrick Miller, who's also been on the podcast, Dr. Tony Jackson, who, as you know, is one of my great heroes. Some of those who are doing this amazing work and are truly thought leaders in our profession are sitting at the table, and we're talking through the issues of the day. And so there's some leadership theory, and that's needed and necessary, but there's a lot of how are you handling what we're doing this afternoon? And that's just absolutely invaluable. And then the last thing I would mention, Jack, is the connection with those who paved the way for us. And so being led in the program by you, who have just such an incredible background and love for paying it forward. People like Sam Houston, who's also been on the podcast, who really come in and share in a deep way and remind us that while we have challenges we've not had before, there have always been challenges, and the work is to circle it back, to always keep the main thing the main thing. And so from my personal standpoint, Jack, thank you so much for creating these opportunities for leaders, because they've been powerful. And for our listeners outside of North Carolina, I hope that in the descriptions of the program, you've heard elements to bring into the professional development you may lead in the school, in the district, at the state level, which is things like table talk and things like having a conversation with the speaker and your team before the speaker ever comes to the professional development to guide that work. Jack, that's so powerful. Thank you for asking that question. Jack, as we kind of conclude our time together, I feel like we could have a series of podcast episodes. In fact, you and I could probably go the entire year and still not say everything that needs to be said. But being mindful of our time and the time of our educational leaders, I'd like to ask you to kind of boil it all down to this. We're getting ready to start the 2021-2022 school year. It is a time of great challenge. It's a time where we may be a little weary in the work, even though we're just coming off of summer. But I wonder, what message do you have for leaders as we launch into this new school year?
Rob, I'm certainly honored to have been on the podcast, and it's been a great experience, and I learn every week when I listen to your podcast. But my closing comments would be as follows. To our North Carolina superintendents and education leaders and those who aspire to become superintendents, I say thank you for your untiring commitment and stellar leadership in making your district the best it can be. You are responsible for educating 1.5 million students, and you have successfully accepted that challenge. I'm honored to stand with you and support you. It is a privilege to be associated with each of you, and may God bless you, your family, and your school district in the coming school year.
Jack, you are absolutely so very important in my professional life, and I consider you a personal friend. And I want to say thank you in this moment for paying it forward. All those who encouraged you in your career early on, I certainly want to thank, because you've become an encourager to so many across our state. And I know you're a national voice through AASA as well. Jack, thank you for sharing this time, for being so very generous. My friend, thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have an opportunity to have conversation with you. And I appreciate you talking about your brother, Dr. Tony Jackson. And I believe I saw a tweet that he was your mother's favorite son, and I can understand that.
You're exactly right, and he is. Jack, thank you, buddy. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation with Jack Hoke. Authentic relationships, listening more than you talk, and making sure that the team has what it needs is the secret to leadership that lasts. Thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you for all that you do for every student, every teacher, and every staff member. You are making a difference. If no one else has told you, I want you to know that I believe in you. Good day.
Thank you for listening to the EdLeader podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and consider leaving a review with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so that we may continue to grow the EdLeader community. We hope that you have enjoyed your time with Dr. Jackson. Until next time.